Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people on purpose follow exact orders despite the ones they hate. And in today's episode, we're dealing with airport Karens, nightmare bosses, and one OP follows a new manager's order so much, guys, it ruins the guy's career. It's another satisfying one, so sit back, relax, and remember, these stories only on the Dark Fluff YouTube channel. Let's dive in. So here's some context. I was out in my city, and I was taking a walk around with my roommate. While passing through the main square of the city, we both witnessed a movie-like chase scene where 3 police officers managed to corner a guy who was probably dealing nearby. I'd never seen anything like that involving law enforcement before, so I decided to tell my girlfriend about it live by sending her a WhatsApp voice message. So I raised my phone to record the voice message, but then something happened. On the other side of the street, exactly where they cornered the guy, a young policeman noticed I had my phone in hand and he shouts at me saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" I just froze, confused. I didn't process it. I just stood there looking at him, thinking he couldn't possibly be talking to me. After 3 seconds, I saw him running towards me, still shouting, "What are you doing?" I got seriously scared, so I stretched my arms out towards him without touching him, and I went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down." From that moment on, the conversation went more or less like this. The officer says, "What are you doing? Did you film a video?" I responded, "I didn't make any video. I was sending a voice message to my girlfriend." He then says to me, "Go to your photo gallery immediately and delete the video in front of me." At that moment, I got embarrassed. And why would I get embarrassed, you may ask? Well, I remembered perfectly well that the last few photos I had taken was photos of my downstairs that I sent to my girlfriend. I again try to tell the officer, "Look, I'm not joking, I wasn't taking a photo at all. Listen, the last photo is a photo of my D." He then says, "I don't care, show me. Delete that video immediately." Now, for him, in my photo gallery, there was that video, except that video didn't exist. So I humored him. I opened up my photo gallery and I showed him the latest media. And you guessed it, nothing but pictures of me. He saw it and he stood there for about 2 or 3 seconds, maybe to process what he was seeing. He then closed his eyes and he looked away from the phone and he says to me, "Get out of here." So we left and I was crying with laughter. My roommate was too. All in all, it was a pretty great evening. Yeah, talk about a request backfiring so hard, guys. No pun intended for you naughties. And for those who might be curious, OP does say they're not in the US, and where they live, cops apparently do this a lot. And with that, one can only imagine what they see in people's photo albums. And this person shares a similar experience. They say, "My coworker and absolute hero maliciously complied at security on one of our subcontractor jobs. The customer was a manufacturer for high-end electronic components. Security was tight, as a small 4 by 6 inch box could contain $250,000 worth of microchips. Our team was installing equipment in their facility for a week. A security checkpoint had to be passed every trip in or out of the building. So that said, this one Mr. Security Guard, Chad maybe, decided my coworker, Steve, was probably way more suspicious than the 4 other techs. So every trip in or out, not only was Steve made to dump his entire contents of his backpack on the table and go through it, Chad requested Steve to show him the last 5 pictures taken on his phone to prove he wasn't stealing secrets. And that's all fine, except that Chad lets everyone else through without any sort of inspection. Steve's trying to stay positive, but obviously this is eating away at him. Steve tries to be overly positive and also a bit snarky with comments like, "Thank you, Paul Blart, for keeping America safe." And that's when Steve has the idea that will free him the rest of the week. Wednesday comes along, and Steve's overly scrutinized on our way in as usual. As we head to security at lunch, Steve says he has to go to the bathroom. He comes back out a few minutes later, absolutely giddy. Security, of course, stops us on the way out and asks Steve to see his camera roll. Steve gladly hands the phone over. Chad is then greeted by some very creative angled shots of Steve's butt, the hole to be specific. This causes Chad to scream, "What the F?" throwing Steve's phone down on the table. And that's when Steve says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had a hemorrhoid and I wanted to see how bad it was. Is everything okay with my pictures? Is the facility safe?" Chad never checked Steve's materials again. Good on you, Steve. What a well-played compliance that was, and honestly, after that, I wouldn't be surprised if the security guard never checked anyone's phone again. And this person comments, "And that's how Steve hacked security and got the secrets out. Nicely done." Imagine that, right? This next OP and their coworkers fights back against a horrible new work policy. Listen to this one. About 6 years ago, I worked for a power supply company in the UK. I worked in a small project team that coordinated all the company's major infrastructure projects. The job required us to travel to meetings all over the country, and over the course of a year, we'd average around 800 company miles per week, depending on the time of year and where the projects were located. One day, someone in the finance department reviews our expense claims and noticed that over a single quarter, we hadn't driven enough company miles to qualify for company cars under the policy. They made the decision based on that one quarter alone, without looking at any historical data or considering the nature of our work. As a result, we were told that we were losing our company cars and we'd have to return them to the leasing company once the leases expired. Cue the malicious compliance. As project engineers, we were very good at following rules exactly as they were written. Normally, that benefited both us and the company, but this time, it definitely didn't. In the UK, company cars are taxed as a, quote, benefit in kind, and the government changes those tax rules whenever it sees fit. My team had all carefully chosen cars that stayed under our £300 monthly allowance, so the remaining allowance would cover the tax, meaning the cars cost us nothing personally. Unfortunately, the benefit in kind rules had changed that year, so we were already paying more tax than before. Losing the cars on top of that was the final straw. The first thing we did was carefully read the company car policy. We quickly discovered there was nothing preventing us from returning our cars immediately, even though the company was still locked into lease agreements. So we each arranged our own personal transportation and we hand over our company car keys at the very next team meeting. Then, we read through the company's travel policy. We started using rental cars and trains for traveling. And the thing is, trains and rental cars in the UK are not cheap, and none of us were willing to use our personal cars. Before all of this happened, we would happily work a long day, drive to meetings ourselves, and maybe claim a little overtime or time in lieu. We'd much rather get home late than spend the night anyways, but that changed overnight. We worked exactly our contracted 7.5-hour day and not a minute longer. If a meeting couldn't be completed within those hours, we would check into a hotel, claim the full £25 dinner allowance, and then stay the night. And then, because company policy allowed it after being away on business, we would work from home the following day, instead of returning straight to the office. We followed every policy to the letter. About 8 weeks later, our entire team was called into a meeting with our line manager and department manager to discuss expenses, and the numbers were eye-opening. Our travel expenses, just for the first month after giving up our company cars, were much higher than our total travel expenses for the previous 12 months combined. And the best part is, our line manager admits everything we claimed was completely within company policy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have approved the expense reports. The department manager did not argue. Instead, he simply informed us that we would all be getting our company cars back and said he expected our expense reports to return to their previous levels. We all declined the offer of company cars, and we let management know that we'd be adhering to the travel policy to the letter. Management can't exactly force us to accept company cars again, as we were following every travel policy that they had written. Every train ticket, hotel room, dinner allowance, and mileage claim was allowed under the policy. They created the rules, and now they had to live with them. Listen, I love how everyone just stuck with it, and they denied going back to the way things were to really get the point across. And I do wonder if the person in the finance department regretted calling them out on it. Like, imagine trying to look good to save the company money and it all blows up. And if you guys think that was satisfying, this next OP makes the boss regret exactly what they said. So here's a little bit of backstory. One of my jobs is to organize and send technicians to various locations to provide maintenance and support for the equipment we run. We have a few hubs around the United States where technicians are based out of, but oftentimes they'll need to fly or drive to a location that's far enough away from the hub where they're entitled to travel and per diem. I have to review the requests for travel and per diem to make sure they're reasonable, such as not staying in a suite or flying first class and no rental upgrades unless needed, so on and so forth. Once I've calculated the costs involved, I request funding from another department and I set that aside for the travel, so the technicians can be reimbursed once they come back. On this particular day, we had an emergency pop up where we had to send technicians quickly out to a remote location in the middle of nowhere. On top of that, most of our technicians were already scheduled to be on other jobs. The only hub that had people available was the one in Hawaii, so the guys go ahead and they talk to our contracted travel agency to arrange their flights and provide us the info for how much all of that will cost. The guys already know the routine and really try to make sure that we're not spending more than absolutely needed on this emergency maintenance. I double check it all, and I know it's gonna cost us a pretty penny to send guys last minute from Hawaii to the middle of nowhere. All in all, with rentals, hotels, and so on, we're looking at about $35,000 for the trip. So I go ahead and process the request and then request the money from the funding guys, because without them saying okay, the trip doesn't happen. And here's the reply on which our bosses are CC'd. The reply said, I looked the requests over and I saw several issues. First of all, are the technicians sharing hotel rooms? As per company policy, these personnel are to share rooms. Secondly, do we really need 3 rental cars? Why not get 1 compact and a minivan for transportation? Lastly, the other expenses are way overinflated. I understand there will be fuel costs, and depending on the airport they fly into, there could be a bridge toll, but the amount requested is absurd. Please correct these issues and resubmit. Funds are limited and we can't afford frivolous spending. I respond, okay, understood. We will go back to reschedule the flights and consolidate hotel rooms and vehicles. This process takes a few more hours while the guys talk to the travel agency and rebook the last-minute flights. Everybody knows that flight and hotel prices skyrocket as you get closer to the dates. We cancel the 3 compact vehicles for the people arriving at separate times at an international airport that's further away from the location, as the closer regional airport is now out of available flights. We have them all wait at the airport for hours until everyone arrives, to reserve 2 large SUVs to carry people and several bags of luggage and tools. This results in higher vehicle and fuel costs. We also rebook hotels so technicians can share double occupancy rooms, but the reduction in hotel costs doesn't even begin to cover the other rebookings. We lay out in writing all the cost-cutting measures and efforts to save money as requested in the email from the funding department. All in all, the total is now $42,000. I sent the email reply to the funding department, and I got a begrudging response authorizing the $42,000. I used to work at a regional airline. The jet we used for our flight to the big city had 6 business class seats. The business class service was really good for a 2-hour flight. It included a full bar service, a hot meal, warmed bread basket, followed by a trolley with dessert and signature coffee. The good old days. That all said, one of our regular travelers was a local business owner who was just a slimy businessman. The guy had a reputation for making a lot of money from some petty, shady deals over the years. We would roll our eyes when we saw him coming to the check-in counter because the guy would always name drop and ask for special treatment. He always used the business class check-in line, even though he was usually in economy. He didn't have frequent flyer status, but he was buddies with one of the airline executives, and he always let us know this fact when he checked in by making sure to tell us that he was good friends with Vice President Karen. The guy would always ask for free upgrades, extra baggage, not charging a change fee, last-minute discounts, all that stuff. If he didn't get what he wanted, he immediately called VP Karen, who would usually then call us and approve whatever he wanted. So one day, this guy checks in for his flight to the big city, and of course, he name drops and then asks for a free business upgrade because I'm friends with VP Karen, and they said it would be okay. He was traveling on a discounted ticket that wasn't even eligible for upgrade, even if he did have an upgrade coupon, which he didn't. So I informed him that he wasn't eligible for any upgrade on this ticket, and I gave him his boarding pass and sent him on his way. Of course, the guy flips open his cell phone and immediately calls VP Karen. Within 2 minutes, the phone at the check-in desk rings, and it's VP Karen authorizing me to override the policy and upgrade this guy to business class with no upgrade coupon required, if there is room. The flight that day wasn't that busy, and only one person booked in business class, leaving 5 open seats. I was really irritated, but I begrudgingly put the slimy businessman on the upgrade list anyways. He returns to the check-in counter and he picks up his standby boarding card, and he gives me a smug "I told you so" look. But then, what Vice President Karen said clicked with me. The phrase, "if there's room." The next passenger I checked in was a super nice lady. Big smile, friendly, please and thank yous. "Oh, thank you so much for checking my bags to my connecting flight. That's so nice of you." Just overall really pleasant to deal with. I was taking my time and we were chatting a bit since it wasn't that busy. She was a teacher going on a trip to see her family, and it was her first visit with them in over a year, and she was gonna meet her little nephew for the first time. She was overjoyed to just have the time off to travel. So I typed in a few things into the computer to make it look like I was checking something about her connecting flights, and then said to her, "Oh, it looks like you've been selected today to receive a free upgrade to business class." Hearing that, she was shocked and she says, "I've never flown business class in my life. This is so amazing." At the time, we were rarely questioned if we upgraded someone without a certificate. Over the next 20 minutes, I found excuses to upgrade 4 other passengers. One who was an actual frequent flyer, one woman who had never flown before, and a dad and daughter going to see a sick relative. I went to board the flight, and I had to tell slimy businessman that I was sorry, but business class was full, and I can't offer him an upgrade today. The teacher I upgraded profusely thanked me again when she boarded with the rest of the business class passengers. Little did she know that it really made my day also. And for those who might be wondering, there were no repercussions to my actions. We rarely upgraded passengers randomly, so it wasn't something that caught management's attention, and they mostly trusted our judgment on these things. But like many customer service jobs, I'm sure, if you were nice to us, we would go out of our way to help you. If you're not nice to us, we would apply the rules very strictly. Again, I've said this so many times, like, be nice to the people you're dealing with because you never know what they can do for you. Like, I bet that lady still tells people about the nice person who upgraded her to business class and how she had such a wonderful experience. What a wholesome story that was. In this next post, a new boss comes in and tries to change everything, guys. And you guessed it, it doesn't go well. A few years ago, I worked in graphic design for a large printing company. I was salaried, but 1 week every month, I was part of an on-call rotation. The system had been in place since the 1980s and worked perfectly. Every employee on the rotation received a flat $200 each month for simply being available. If we were actually called out, we clocked in and we were paid roughly 130% of our normal hourly rate until the job was finished. Nobody had ever complained about it, and then we get a new finance manager. The guy was fresh out of university in his early 20s, and he proudly announced that he'd joined the company's graduate leadership program. Within the first few minutes of introducing himself, he'd already talked about reducing costs, increasing efficiency, and cutting unnecessary spending. He never once mentioned the work we actually did. We'll call him Mr. Idiot. At first, we gave him the benefit of the doubt. Every new manager wants to make a good first impression, but unfortunately, Mr. Idiot's idea of making an impression was inserting himself into everything. Within 2 weeks, the guy insisted every expense claim come directly across his desk. That led to conversations like, why does it cost $60 in fuel to drive 100 miles? And we'd have to say something like, because the van had over a ton of product in the back and the engine had to stay running while the forklifts loaded and unloaded it. Or he would say something like, why did you buy fuel at Shell? So-and-so place is much cheaper. Because Shell was beside the customer and so-and-so place was 15 miles away. His solution to cutting costs was, the vans can't go home with employees anymore. Leave them at the office every night. He couldn't understand that many of us started jobs directly from home in the morning, or responded to overnight emergencies. In his mind, everybody apparently lived 5 minutes from work. We weren't thrilled, but then he came after something so much worse, the on-call payments. For more than 30 years, every Thursday, when the on-call duty changed hands, the outgoing employee claimed 30 minutes to wash, fuel, and clean the van. The incoming employee claimed another 30 minutes to check inventory and restock supplies. It added up to 1 paid hour each week. That 1 hour kept every van clean, fueled, stocked, and ready for emergencies. Since the duty rotated between 4 vans, every vehicle got regular exercise, cleaning, and maintenance without anyone having to think about it. It was a system designed years earlier by a retired director who had previously worked as a paramedic. It was simple, effective, cheap, but Mr. Idiot hated it. The guy announced that everyone would lose that extra hour. His reasoning was simple. He says, it's your job to be ready for work. You shouldn't be paid to prepare. When we argued that the preparation benefited the company, he doubles down. And he says, if you're on call, just leave the van at work. Pick it up when you're needed. And the thing is, our senior finance manager backed him completely. He said, you all drive, just come to the office first, which is perfect. Time for malicious compliance. From that day forward, nobody took a van home. If we got called at 2 in the morning, we drove our own cars to the office first. We collected the van, drove to the customer, finished the job, and returned the van to the office, and then drove our own cars back home. And the funny part is the company reimbursed us for using our personal vehicles outside normal working hours, which amounted to 40 cents per mile. If we used the company van, there was no mileage reimbursement. So by forcing us to collect the vans from the office every single time, Mr. Idiot had accidentally created a situation where every single call-out included 2 extra personal car journeys that the company now had to pay for. One colleague lived nearly 60 miles from the office. During one particularly busy week, he was called out 9 separate times. By the end of that week, he earned almost twice what he normally would have, thanks to the mileage payments alone. And suddenly, Mr. Idiot wasn't our enemy anymore. The guy was giving us raises, basically. The extra driving was annoyed, but getting paid hundreds of extra dollars every month made it surprisingly easy to follow the rules. Eventually, he of course notices something strange. Nobody was complaining anymore, and that made him suspicious, so the guy looks at the numbers. His brilliant plan had saved roughly $250 a month by removing 1 hour of on-call preparation, but it also created around $500 in extra mileage reimbursements and over $1,000 in additional on-call labor costs every month. Even worse, response times had exploded. What used to take 20 minutes now often took an hour. One customer mentioned that he watched one of our engineers drive past their building in his own car, disappear towards the office, and then return 40 minutes later in a company van. After finishing the job, they watched him drive back to the office, swap vehicles again, and then head home. The complaints just poured in, and almost overnight, the old system returned. We were allowed to take vans home again, and handover was reinstated. And Mr. Idiot was quietly removed from our department. I thought that was the end of it, but my coworkers had other ideas. They pointed out that we'd now been instructed to leave the vans at work, so that's exactly what we were doing. Some claimed they had bought new cars and they no longer had room to park the van at home. Others simply insisted that they were following the most recent policy they'd been given. Whether those excuses were true or not, everyone stood together. So despite management reversing the decision, the damage was done. For the rest of the time I worked there, every on-call employee continued driving to the office first and then collected a van, completed the job, returned the van, and then drove home. The company kept paying for every extra mile. Mr. Asshat disappeared for a while and we never heard about him again. I checked the corporate directory and I saw that he was missing, so I assume he was shown the door. The senior finance guy was still in the company, but he had absolutely no say in what we did. He was demoted and he was moved from client manager to supplier coordinator, which I assume means he's now living life checking contracts and financial statements. In my opinion, there's nothing more satisfying than a new power-tripping boss coming in, making new rules that destroys a well-running company and gets fired for it. And in this case, it's even more satisfying to know that OP and their coworkers took advantage of the policies and made more money than they ever have because of this guy. What a story that was. This last OP teaches a smug boss a lesson she'll never forget. This was my first security gig right out of the military. It was a good starter job for security work. It was access control at a medium-sized aircraft engine factory. A friend of mine worked HR there, but he also held the title as head of security, so he offered me a job and I accepted. One of our biggest rules were ID checks. Apparently, a few years prior, a couple of people had gotten in with photocopied IDs. So after that, we had to physically check that the ID was plastic. We did this by touching it. Now, if you do access control enough, you start memorizing people. We didn't check those IDs by touching them because we knew them, and if they'd been fired, we would have gotten a notice. Well, that angered the head of HR, so she set some new rules. And the thing is, she wasn't the head of security, but security always fell under HR, so she kind of was. She said all IDs must be checked, no exceptions. She also said that no non-employee is allowed through the gate without a notice signed by her or the head of security, and it has to be submitted 12 hours prior to their entry, like for people scheduled for interviews. On top of that, visitor badges assigned without prior approval can only be done for normal deliveries, like post office or FedEx. Anyone who violates it will be reported by security to HR for a security violation. Now, this was all fine and dandy. We really didn't care. Everything went smooth for about a month until that one day. Here she comes to the gate, but she isn't driving, her husband is. It's raining, and I mean flood level raining. I asked her husband for his ID, and he says he doesn't have one. She saw where this was going, and she tried to stop me. He was only there to take her in because it was raining, and she didn't want to walk from her car to the building and ruin her outfit. And this is when I threw the rules right back at her. I didn't have a security notice for him, so I couldn't assign a badge, and I couldn't let him in. She tried to use the whole, but it's only 100 yards, let me in, which I again reminded her of the rule that she set down. She actually said to me, "Well, I'm your boss, we're going in anyways," which I replied again her rule that any breaches of policy must be reported as a security violation. So there she is, dressed to the nines, forced to walk without a jacket to the building, 100 yards in pouring rain to get to her office. And why didn't we lend her a security rain jacket, you ask? Because she said there wasn't enough money in security budget to buy them. Later that day, she modified the rules so that on drop-offs, security has full discretion to allow someone entry for that purpose. We also got our rain jackets 2 weeks later, and she never bothered security again. And with that story brings us to another end of r / malicious compliance, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r / entitled People episode, where Karens think they own the airport and it doesn't go well for them. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.